I would say the biggest enablers of projects going well are, do you have tech people on your team? Do you have training managers on your team that will eventually take this over? Do you have executive sponsorship to really do this, to drive the change management? The projects that are successful all have those pieces. The projects that don't have those pieces are not successful.
Did you know that 91% of phishing attacks are conducted via email? Freight brokers are particularly at risk as email is the primary, really only option to collect carrier invoices, until now. ePay Manager, powered by OTR Solutions, is a back office automation and carrier payments platform that revolutionizes brokerage back offices with their proactive invoicing workflow, a centralized portal that gets you out of your email. The key to ePay's invoicing workflow is that the invoice is proactively triggered by the broker's TMS and is only created once the carrier reviews the details, which catches invoice disputes early on. This means that you can increase your invoice processing by up to 300 to 500% and reduce billing inaccuracies by 99%. Learn more about ePay by visiting epaymanager.com or text ePayFC to 80483 to see what they can do for your brokerage.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Control Chain. Struggling to find loads? Control Chain offers a cost-effective solution for carriers to secure more freight contracts with reliable shippers. Plus, you get a free tool that automates tasks like managing order details, updating customers, and sending PODs. Say goodbye to spreadsheets, emails, and phone calls. With Control Chain, you can manage everything on one platform, from planning and execution to getting paid. Sign up at controlchain.com and start receiving loads today. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's episode, I did want to take a second to tell you a little bit about our new sponsor, Levity.ai. In freight, time is money and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Whether it's incoming emails from shippers or carriers, Levity's got you covered. It understands any language, any format, and even interprets non-standard formatting. Visit Levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
What's up, people? We're back. Another episode of Freight Caviar Podcast. We're in beautiful, sunny, no, just kidding, Chicago, Illinois. Not sunny right now, but still not so bad of a view behind us. We're joined by the CEO of Revenova, Charles Craigmile.
You got it.
I got it. We're going to roll with this one. So good time back. I'm back. And we've got a beautiful setting for a good conversation. So let's just get right into it.
So Reed flew in from Phoenix yesterday. I flew in from Poland a week ago. Christian lives in Chicago. And today we also have the happy hour, Freight Caviar happy hour here in this room. Well, before that, we're going to have a really interesting conversation with Charles. He is the president, co-founder, and CEO of Revenova, a TMS that's built on Salesforce. And before that, he also had a very interesting career. So I want to dive into that. Can you take us, Charles, back to the early days? I know you grew up around the area, and just kind of like tell us like what were you interested in, and kind of walk us through your life, the early years.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation here, and happy to join you guys for a conversation. Really going back to the beginning after I left school, I was a commercial lending officer at Northern Trust Company here in Chicago. So I was a middle market lender to manufacturers, distributors, and you're providing line of credit, working capital, sometimes capital for machinery purchases. And I found that I liked what my customers were doing more than what I was doing. So I eventually got into manufacturing and operations, which was what I really liked, and eventually rose through the ranks. And I think one of my favorite jobs was being VP of supply chain for Learning Curve International, which was a children's toy company. So I was over all of the operations in the U.S., Asia, Australia, the UK, running warehouses, product development.
Was that your first job outside of the lending world?
No, I had moved through like consulting at Ernst & Young, and then I also was VP of manufacturing for a food company in the Northwest Side here called Orville Kent Food Company. So think of 3 manufacturing plants and a plant in Mexico, and that was a tremendous learning experience. And so I kind of grew up on the other side of the desk versus logistics providers, but I kind of learned the business from the other side of being a manufacturer, a shipper, running warehouses. So that always gave me a great deal of empathy.
Yeah.
When I eventually got to Schneider Logistics, where I was running several offices for them, and this was in the mid-2000s. And it was one of the motivations for starting Revenova, because when I was at Schneider, which is really known as, Big Orange, in those days, it was...
Can't miss those brothers.
Right. It was one of the largest, if not the largest, privately held, back then, truckload dry van carrier in the U.S. And strategically, they started up a logistics brokerage group. Asked me to run the offices there at the beginning, which I was happy to do. And I saw the state of the technology back then was so pathetic and terrible.
What Schneider was using?
Well, it was by mode.
AS400.
Yeah, we were literally booking truckload brokerage off of the Schneider asset system. And was kind of contorted and rejiggered, but not much. Think of F keys on the bottom, green bar reports that you tear off the printer. And that also, I had salespeople keying in shipment data, origin, destination, whatever, and then we'd have to rekey it again in the operating system.
Makes sense.
And then that was just for truckload.
Nice.
And then you move to another mode like LTL. Back then, there was no P44s or the aggregators. You literally had to contact the individual LTL carrier, then contact another one to compare prices. LTL quoting, I don't think any broker made any money on LTL margins in the 90s or 2000, if they even provided the service. Then intermodal, another set of tools. You see where this goes.
Yeah.
And I looked at that and I thought this can't be the state of the tech, because manufacturing had actually advanced a lot faster using ERP. Think of SAP, Bon, Oracle. Yep. They'd made tremendous advances. And then it's almost like people ran out of budget when they got to transportation and said, oh, well, it's complicated. It's the final mile. It's the fourth man in the relay race. It's not that interesting. There were no one went to school for logistics,
Yeah.
And so the tech was awful. But when I left Schneider Logistics, I started Forsiva on the Salesforce platform as an independent company in the area of credit and collections for logistics companies, because that was one of my headaches at Schneider, where I had aggressive young folks booking freight all the time, and then the credit department in Green Bay, Wisconsin would run the credits and say, oh, no, they're not a good credit. And how do you tell someone who just spent, days and days, weeks and weeks winning business and then being told they're a bad...
So your reps had no visibility into the credit worthiness of who they were calling, essentially?
I would ask them to do that if they could through their own steam. But in the end, if they were a bad credit and that was deemed as such, you couldn't make any headway with them. And the same is true on the carrier side. And of course, there you have to be much more careful anyway. But so I saw that and I thought, well, if you could have an app that integrates to D&B, Equifax, Experian, where you could get credit data in on that prospect. Let's say you're at a trade show.
Yeah.
Should I write orders for this prospect?
Yeah.
And if you could know within 30 seconds through a scoring algorithm on credit data, payment history, AR history, what kind of a credit are they? And if you got that approval and you worked through those rules in advance with your finance department, you could have salespeople self-help.
Yeah.
And this took off like wildfire. And
so you left Schneider and started this.
Forsiva.
Okay.
And it started with logistics firms, but everyone needed this. So any company, services, manufacturers.
So really no solution existed?
D&B had their own desktop solution.
Yeah.
Experian had their own solution. Equifax had their own.
Yeah.
Mine was on the cloud and accessible anywhere in the world if you had a secure internet connection, i.e. salespeople's lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not at the home office on a desktop. So that took off. That started in 2009. And by 2013, 2014, I had Equifax D&B selling my product under their brand name.
Did you raise any capital? How did you fund this business?
Just myself and a partner of mine. So we always, the good news both with Forsiva and Revenova is I never needed a Series B. We had a specific strategy, a specific mission. I knew it would work because being on that other side of the desk, I knew where my pain was.
Yeah.
And that took off, and Equifax eventually said to us, look, we can't be selling Google and then having D&B sales rep in there selling Google, and it's your product. Wow. And I would get calls from the buyers saying, can we buy from you? Mm-hmm. And I kind of had agreed to let them be my sales arm, and I didn't want that channel conflict, and it wasn't sustainable. So Equifax said, look, let's make a deal here. And so we did. And that then freed me up after.
What year was that?
That was 2014.
Okay.
And then being a bit obsessive, I took like a week off and said, now I can get back into brokerage and logistics.
Hey there, amazing listeners. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on our podcast, we need your support. It will only take a moment, but it would mean the world to us. Please make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share with one of your friends that would enjoy our content. Your engagement helps us reach more people and bring more awesome episodes to you. Thanks a million, and thanks for being part of the podcast community.
What did day one of that building that company look like? What was the first thing that you determined we need to do to basically provide credit, credit opportunities to?
Sure. There's a couple things. You've got to do the product engineering correctly, and there's a market, but then you have to figure out, how do I access that market?
Yeah.
And initially, we had to, in some ways, mature the API world with D&B and Equifax because this was still relatively new. The whole idea of API was relatively new at scale. I mean, it was being done, but just kind of point solutions still. And so once we had built those integrations and then start getting into the marketplace, and Salesforce was an assist there because it's a natural marketing engine for us. We would do lunch and learns with the Salesforce reps and say, this little button on the dashboard can invoke an entire credit algorithm to approve accounts for doing business with. We could score an AR portfolio as well in terms of where is it at risk. So you've got the traditional aging of AR, but what about qualitative credit risk in your portfolio? That got some traction with the Salesforce reps. Mm-hmm. And we said, that's a great add-on to our CRM concept. Mm-hmm. The big idea at Revenova was marrying up the best CRM in the world, which is Salesforce by far. Yeah. Look at market share, with TMS multimodal tools. I did that with credit and collections. And what was missing in all the tools I'd always worked with as a manufacturer distributor was transportation was reduced to a dispatch function, meaning a manager of an area sees a load board, often on a whiteboard, but let's say he gets it in his legacy system, and he's spending all day long covering freight. And he's looking at deliveries, but he's covering unassigned loads all day long. Well, that's hardly what I mean by a TMS. A CRM-powered TMS is this 360 view of shippers, carriers, all entities in the system. It could be insurance carriers for our carrier onboarding app. It could be locations. So we repurposed all the Salesforce objects and architecture into a logistics vocabulary so that locations, the traditional customer accounts, carrier information, shippers, any entity is in the system. So sales and carrier ops are all seeing the same data real time, anywhere in the world. multi-device, multilingual, multi-currency out of the box. And that's what makes us different, is that we have this platform that we develop on called Salesforce, and we're part of a partner ecosystem. There's probably something like 4,000 partner apps on the app exchange of Salesforce. That allows me to extend my product because I resell an accounting package that's on the platform that's seamless to my product because we share the same objects on the platform. So there's no integration per se. As we like to say, and my co-founder with me, Mike Horvath, likes to say, innovate, don't integrate. Mm-hmm. Because if you spend all your time duct taping different systems together, you lose the real-time nature of things. And so by having on-platform solutions, we work with a WMS company managing warehouses with their tech. I have customers that use my product for everything that surrounds the warehouse, inbounds, outbounds, and their app runs picking orders in the warehouse. I've done work with another app. It's a manufacturing purchasing app on the App Exchange with Solar City Tesla for managing all of their West Coast moves along their intra-warehouse network, installing solar panels. They use my product for all their LTL pricing and dispatching, but they use the manufacturer for all the purchasing and componentry and CPQ of the panels. So by being on the App Exchange, I can extend the power of my TMS to touch all the supply chain components that I currently don't do, and I don't have to develop those products. I just connect to them.
Yeah, so it's like you're basically bolting on to like an existing network effect.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you have kind of the added momentum of all the other products.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's some of my customers run warehouses.
Yeah.
And they appreciate that capability. But it you can see how it's fundamentally different from my competitors.
Yeah.
Think of the top competitors in TMS. None of them have an app exchange. There is no McLeod app exchange.
Yeah.
There is no Algex app exchange. There is no Mastery app exchange. And so the vision I have is to build out the modes, but also tighten and expand the supply chain footprint we have as well. And it's all, again, I can't emphasize this enough, all real time.
Yeah. So you built Forziva on...
Just go ahead. And then
I was just going to say, so you built Forziva on... I'm saying that. I said that, right?
You
right.
did.
Okay, great.
You're 2 for 2. You're 2 for 2.
I'm winning here. You built that on Salesforce. Was there ever a question that Revenova would be built on Salesforce or not?
No. It's funny, when I started it and we chose our lane of Salesforce, the guys at Microsoft immediately contacted me and said, hey, we love what you did at Forziva.
Yeah.
And they have a partner program too. And of course, they're a huge cloud company, many times the size of Salesforce. And they had tried building their own TMS and it kind of belly flopped in the deep end.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, look, you have to be very surgical when you start. For everyone thinking of startups, if you start to drift, and you can drift operationally as well,
yep.
You will burn through a lot of cash and not get very far. Mm-hmm. And so we picked the lane, which doesn't mean we exclude considering other platforms, but Salesforce just offered us so much capability right out of the box.
And you already knew how to...
And all my developers
they knew
had 10, 15 years experience developing. Obviously, Microsoft, they had experience developing there too, but Salesforce just had a much more robust offering for us.
Mm-hmm. So, Charles, you got both of your ideas from being a Schneider.
Well, I would say all the way back to, my manufacturing distribution days.
All of that experience added up to those two ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, back in 2014, like, the TMS market was a little bit different than it is today.
That's
that was, like, right around the time that venture capital was, like, about to start flowing in.
Yes, right before.
And I'm curious if you could take us back to, like, the early days of Revenova. Like, what were you, going up against, like, the competitors, and also, like, how the ecosystem of the industry has changed and evolved since then?
Sure. I would say this, the what's good or bad is the lead competitors are still kind of the same. Some of them, though, still, and I won't get into names, no point, but some of them still have a large legacy on-premise footprint, which they don't know quite what to do about. I'll give you...
What is that?
What I mean by that is when you're on-premise, that means all of your tech, you have your local server room, you are loading DVDs onto a server.
Not cloud-based.
Not cloud-based, right.
No.
The physical servers.
On-prem, baby.
Yeah. The big divide is on-prem versus cloud.
Yeah.
And people are not purely either, frankly, although a lot of the best firms are pure cloud. But in those days, on-prem was still dominant.
Yep.
Whereas today, you've got the people I most look at are up-and-comers who are pure cloud like I am. Everything I have runs on Salesforce. I don't have any legacy, I call them boat anchors, that I'm dragging around that I have to attend to. Some of the larger competitors, well over half of their customer base is still on-premise. And they don't have a clean upgrade path because they've customized the heck out of whatever they purchased long ago. No one, frankly, knows what they've customized. Sometimes the customer lost the techs who did all the customizations and they feel kind of stuck. So one of my favorite questions to ask at the trade shows, whether it's FreightWaves or TIA or ATA, is what version of whatever you're on, what year is it? And they'll kind of look at their shoes. These are what I call the refugees. They're looking, but they're kind of stuck. And they'll say 2016, 2014, whereas I'm doing 4 releases a year, backward compatible. I'm matching the cadence of Salesforce, who does a winter release, summer, spring, fall releases. And we draft off of that because we're shoveling in new feature functionality every quarter. And that's one of our competitive advantages is that we have our own ideas, but we love getting great ideas from our customers too. And we have a process by which we get that feedback. So we're very interested in feedback, and we're nimble enough to incorporate it into product releases if we don't do what I would call a configuration at the customer, because all of our toolkits don't touch my core layer. This gets techie. There's a core layer where our code lives that isn't compromised by customizations. And the classic example is field layout. You can change the UI of my product without disrupting the core code base.
Yeah.
People love doing that. And as a result, we can do customizations that also eventually make their way into the product and have the best of both worlds. But it's all backward compatible. And so you as a customer can do your little customizations, and then the latest release will slide right in because I don't allow you to penetrate the key layer of my code. And that's the strength of Salesforce.
But when you're in those scenarios, when you're at the trade shows and you're making, people look at their shoes, not knowing what version of whatever TMS they're using they're on.
Right.
I mean, and they could be like, oh, wow, we would love to use this. They could be totally bought into the idea of it.
Right.
But, going from that to them using it, implementing it is not as easy as, that's
the perception. And I'm astounded by my competitors who remain nameless, will charge for doing data exports and imports. And that astounded me. I was like,
Those types of patterns I'd never understood either.
You can import and export out of my product hourly if you wanted.
But at least the perception is there amongst people
that it's a heavy lift,
right, or long and arduous, because that's what they're used to,
right.
So how do you convince somebody, hey, you may think you may be used to an implementation taking a year,
right,
or 2 or 3, or being impossible,
right?
How do you get them to, in the sales process, say, okay, great, we're bought into the idea of switching, we like the features. And we'll take the leap to go from, because there's huge potential for screw ups in that process, not even things that you can't even control, right? Because you obviously need to get them to use it. All of their people need to start using it.
Right.
So there's, and these are all oftentimes, companies where issue breakdowns in processes have real kind of compounding effects. You know what I mean? Like,
very true. And I would say the biggest enablers of projects going well are, do you have tech people on your team? Do you have training managers on your team that will eventually take this over? You have executive sponsorship to really do this, to drive the change management. The projects that are successful all have those pieces. The projects that don't have those pieces are not successful. That said, the long pole in the tent is always data migration, always. And the condition of people's data is often pretty bad, or the formats are different. And so as, people in the brokerage world, if you've got a real go-go environment, you might have Procter & Gamble spelled 5 different ways in your system because there were 5 different reps who wanted to basically cannibalize each other.
ePay Manager, powered by OTR Solutions, is a back office automation and carrier payments platform that revolutionizes brokerage back offices with their proactive invoicing workflow, a centralized portal that gets you out of your email. Learn more about ePay by visiting epaymanager.com or text ePayFC to 80483 to see what they can do for your brokerage.
And so a lot of data cleanup is required, but we have templates that we start with and walk people through. Is if you can get your data in this format, it can be uploaded in 24 hours into our product. And the hard part is not the upload. It's never the tech that's the hard part, actually. It's you had faulty business practices, you have got garbage data, you need to spend 2 weeks just cleaning up your data. Those are the things that take the time. And then you train people on the workflow. And then you get into, we also have a commission app that computes commissions for the ops people and the sales folks. And you'd be amazed at how complicated people make their commission plans. So if I'm moving from Omaha to Boise, the rep gets 8% and the carrier ops person gets 9%. But if it's on Friday, then they get 6%. And you're like, stop it. And so the other thing we try to do is, please, let's not automate your 30-year-old process. Or I'm not interested in automating Algex. I mean, that's a tired, old product, but people are comfortable with it. And then lastly, you have to pay attention to the accounting group as well, because they are critical to adoption. If the accounting isn't what they want or are looking for, that can delay getting the deal done, because let's face it, a brokerage is a form of an ATM. Cash comes in, cash goes out, and that's the asset-light nature of brokerage. It is a cash machine, and so your accounting has to be very streamlined, intuitive, and the accounting department is as much as part of your deal, or should be, as the rest of the people on the floor. And people overlook that, but because we have an on-platform solution called Accounting Seed, we're selling an end-to-end process, quote to cash. We literally mean that. That's what a TMS is. And if your tech doesn't enable the cash machine nature of the business, you haven't solved all the problems that you need to solve.
Hey,
how do you tackle those? How do you tackle this one by one? Obviously, this is water. You want to, How do you? It's a long tail process of various different steps from quote to cash. Right? How do you, as a startup, go after each and? How do you tackle these? Do you tackle them all by one, or the ones that are most important, and then you kind of build up from a strategic?
It's I'll say top down and bottom up. And so what I mean is, bottom up is you whiteboard it with the team. Sometimes you bring customers into the conversation. Give me the happy path, day in the life of quoting at the customer sales level, all the way through quote acceptance, and then carrier ops coming into the process and finding a carrier at the right target margins, tendering, assigning, tracking, all the way to then invoice creation. And then invoice creation all the way through to settlement, cash in, cash out, AP/AR. You have to walk that process. It's like the fishbowl. You have the happy path, and then you have what if the truck breaks down? What if there's an accessorial added that the customer doesn't agree to? Or how do you mark up freight in this process before you give a final quote? So you do the happy path, and then you start doing the what ifs.
And do these have to get built up, like before you actually release to the customer? Can you release pieces of it, or will they not use it until really?
You have to release a coherent spinal cord,
Okay.
so that the patient can walk and move their arms. But there's no question, because we adopt what are called agile methods in product development and product engineering, where if you try to make it perfect all the way through, you'll never release anything ever. And so you have to have a minimally acceptable product release, and then add the Lego pieces to that spinal cord as you get good ideas from customers, but also to fill gaps. Or there can be new API partners that come out of the ground that you're like, hey, I want to integrate to them. That can alter how we do this one area. So think of tracking. There's a short list of 4 or 5 tracking providers that everyone uses. Yeah. As new ones came online, we were like, hey, let's add those. And in fact, some large, big box retailers and other large manufacturers will say, I only want you to use this tracking provider because that's what we use.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or their fleets, private fleets, only use a particular tracking provider. You're like, oh, okay. So you build that out in response to customer needs as well. But if you go for perfection in the first iteration, you'd never release anything.
What would have been an example of some of the concessions you made for the initial Revenova MVP? After you mapped it out and you're like, wow, okay, there's a lot we have to do here, but what are we going to concede on?
I would say, and this is when we started Revenova, I told my people, save me from myself. and it had a truckload bias for sure from the beginning, and which is great because that's the largest brokerage market in North America. Mm-hmm. But our customers took us to the other modes as well, and that kind of put more emphasis on different areas that we didn't start out with. And then it got even more interesting where you start supporting multi-pick consolidations, multi-drop, cross-border, multi-pick consolidation, multi-drop, and you start iterating that out. But it wasn't top of mind for us when we started. Oh yeah, I'm going to support a Toronto area broker who picks up locally, consolidates at the border, then switches out the equipment, gets another piece of equipment, crosses border, and goes to 2 destinations. One is New Jersey, the other one is Southern California, consolidates there, and then does local deliveries. That legs, we call those freight plans in Revenova. I have customers who have like 25-legged freight plans for one quote-unquote move, and we're rolling out a fleet product in October that will have similar types of complexities, particularly with driver lifestyle, where they're driving it to a terminal and then turning around, picking something up at that terminal, going back home. That freight then has been positioned there at that terminal and is picked up by another driver and then taking it further. So that adds complexity to the initial design, and we welcome that because we're very modular in our design concepts so that we can be flexible.
So what would be when you said you had a comment earlier about staying in your lane, essentially, right? And how does that translate to kind of like defining the initial scope of an SRP versus kind of expanding that scope? Is that what
vision? You start with the grand vision, but then you have to execute in a measured, tactical way. But the vision has always been, this has never changed, to be the multimodal provider on Salesforce, on the Salesforce platform. And so our tagline is CRM-powered logistics or transportation, which means multimodal. So all the modes, and the other part of that vision is you can think that through, but your customers will take you other places too. So, for example, I had a lot of brokerage customers saying, when are you coming out with fleet? We love what you do on the brokerage side, but you don't have anything for fleet. So finally, we basically recruited and hired more developers and product managers with specialties in fleet. I hired one of my customers who ran a 500-driver fleet and even ran a larger one prior to that, to come in and say, okay, let's whiteboard this out. Let's start with the simple and the complex. And that's all part of the vision that was implicit. But then as you iterate and get more experiences with customers, they take you to really interesting areas. I have another customer who's top 10 North America 3PL. They've got 35 divisions, and they said to us, say, we just acquired a freight forwarder brokerage. Do you have anything for us? And I said, well, why don't we develop this together? Because I don't have anything. I got the shell of it because OD pairs, and we've got a container system for tracking container numbers, and we have built out some things for cross-border. But he said, well, that's fine, but I'm talking about not only North America, but ocean. And I said, let's design that. And so they said, great, because we don't like anything that we've looked at 10 different systems and none of them have what we really want. And I said, well, let's do this. And so it's another example of, would I be pursuing freight forwarding and customs brokerage left to myself? I probably wouldn't get to it as quickly as I will with, and there's several customers are interested in it. So it's always great to launch new feature functionality, new modes with launch partners, with customers who want it day one, in part because they had a big hand in designing it. And so they know what they're getting in day one.
Was there enough customers that desired that feature that justified it from a business perspective?
Yeah. Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just that one customer approached you.
No, we always look at the market and the importance of the customer, to be frank, as well. And these were significant North American 3PLs that saying, if you can do this, you will get X, Y, and Z. And by the way, I already know, being an import-exporter, how size the ocean market is, for example, and it's huge.
Yeah.
So, but the key is to always strengthen the existing modes that you're in and add these new pieces with launch partners.
I'm curious, Charles, if you could tell us, give us a breakdown of your current customers. It seems like predominantly they're brokerages.
Yes.
But do you also do work with manufacturers and some trucking companies?
Yes. So we do, but you're right. The predominance at the moment is 3PL brokerage and small percents in direct shippers. And the reason why is, if you are a manufacturer distributor, you're already on something. You might be on Oracle, you might be on SAP, and you're really making a micro decision. Well, I want my transportation department to be on something else. So we're not really the enterprise solution. For brokers and fleets, we are. And that's the difference. So the purchase decision is very different for a shipper, because we're only going to be one piece of their larger enterprise system, whereas for the brokers, we can do it all. And for the fleets, we're going to do it all. And so that's the difference. And so we'll take the shipper business, but it's a longer run for a short slide.
Okay.
I can remember talking to a big box retailer, and they brought us out to meet with their .com people. And our revenue model is very much user subscription based, like Salesforce. And so we get out there, we're all excited, and this was in the early days. And we said, so how much freight are you guys moving a year? He said, well, we're the small division of this big box. We're only moving like $6 or $7 billion a year. And I'm like, we got to work on our pricing model. I said, well, how many folks will you need on the system? And they said, maybe about 20, which is not a huge deal for us. It's a smaller deal. And so I was like, the user count, you'd think, they'd have 200 users for 7-8 billion of freight. No, it's a routing guide business. It's all negotiated up front, and they're running it from 20 terminals. And so they don't need any more people on the system to manage 8 billion in freight. And so, and then it was a long process, and then they eventually, they actually made an acquisition, which they didn't need us. And so, and we run into this a lot with other companies where, like, wow, I'm talking to a Fortune 100 food company or a pharmaceutical company. This is great. But they don't have the user count, so you have to kind of figure out a different revenue model, which you can, freight under management. But you see how it's a little different selling proposition, because we're not the enterprise solution.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
So Forciva was kind of not as sweeping a solution for for your customers.
Right. I call it a point solution.
Yeah. So and the TMS is basically like the centerpiece of these companies.
It's the enterprise,
Yeah.
the Oracle for our customers.
Is that just in terms of like everything about a business, like sales and marketing, like how you develop it, all that sort of stuff, like does the complexity that comes with that sort of solution versus a point solution like map on, like, or does that also mean it's more complex to sell, to market, and do all that sort of stuff? Like, so do those processes change significantly, or how does that look?
Because you are selling an enterprise solution, it's not a 30-minute demo like Ring Central or something. So you do have to go through and bring in different groups throughout the company to make people aware of how does this work, how will it impact me, and so on. So from that standpoint, it can be a longer sales cycle than dialing for dollars in the world of brokerage, and you're closing business in minutes. It can go as fast or as slow, though, as the customer wants it to be. In terms of some customers understand that they do want to re-engineer their process. They just don't want to automate their old process.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have others who say, no, we have some proprietary ways we do stuff that we want you to reflect in the layout. And we do that too. And then it just takes time to digest all of that depending on, and you get a blend of people also. But generally we're 90 days plus or minus depending on the customer from deal signed to final training and deploying. So we've brought some people up, new firms, in a week. Others take longer. We're currently implementing a 5,000 driver fleet project for a major company, and their tech is 30 years old, and it's almost like breaking the arm to reset it so that it works.
Are the two colors black and green?
Not saying anything, but you have to help, almost consulting too, where you're saying, look, you've got a lot of legacy that is put together with duct tape and a lot of manual work to run these loads. We want to eliminate that work. And more times than not, the people sign and say, thank you, because they're still in Excel or handwritten stuff, believe it or not. And we come along and say, look, the goal here is to re-engineer this so that it's all in the system. You don't need Excel anymore to do complicated routings and driver compliance, hours of service, and so on. And so what's great is the tech is so advanced, and I'm thinking it in cab tech. All of the devices, the ELD devices that are now available and will continue to evolve is beautiful for me, because then I can plug into all that. And there are now providers out there that we integrate to that are doing for ELD devices what the aggregators did for LTL rates and documents and tendering. And so imagine we're going to roll into the marketplace. Regardless of the ELD device that you're using, my API partner connects to it. And so you can track, it's amazing the data you can capture now from the devices, and then populate my app with it. So it could be the miles per hour, braking, all on a route that I can visually show a dispatcher on a route, let alone tracking. And the tracking will be revolutionized from these ELD devices, because you won't need to go through, pinging and all of this stuff today. Our cell phones, which are intrusive, and drivers don't like having to have 30 different apps on their phone for tracking. The 30 different brokerages, they want one.
Yeah.
But imagine that the cell phone's not out of the equation. It's all coming from the device. And so that's where we're heading and where the industry's headed and is in place now. So anytime partners come out with great API-based stuff that I integrate to quickly, it's in my app, and it's stuffing the appropriate fields based upon the API calls that we engineer, based upon the workflows that we agree to, and it's very powerful, very powerful.
Charles, I'm curious, what is some like user feedback that you hear quite often from like companies that like onboarded with Revenova and like comparing it to like other systems? Is there something that you hear quite often like, oh wow, like this is like a cool feature?
I'm only going to share the good feedback.
Yeah, sure.
We'll get to all the horror stories.
Right. But I'll tell you what, probably the big one was during the pandemic. And what I mean by that is because we were cloud-based and always up, we could support hybrid work environments. There were major brokerages who were proud of their proprietary tech that was on-premise with their server room with the gold padlock on it, and they couldn't operate fully during the pandemic.
Yep.
And we've all read the articles about who those guys were, but it just so reinforced the cloud philosophy. You guys will remember articles written by CTOs of major transportation companies saying, well, the jury is out on the cloud, safety of our data. And I'm reading this, and I remember writing the journal saying you're embarrassing our industry. Do you know that the lines crossed on-premise versus cloud like 10 years ago?
Yeah.
And you're still debating this, whether the jury is out on cloud versus on-premise?
Yep.
And so that anyone who was left lingering, wondering about that when the pandemic hit, all those questions were answered.
Yep.
And so that was, we got feedback from, thank you, I'm glad I picked Revenova in time, particularly when the pandemic hit.
Okay.
The other aspects are just the flexibility of the product, which we repurpose the Salesforce tools on page layout editors, where you can put fields wherever you want on the page. We don't have a rigid construct that my competitors have where you want the OD pair here. Sorry, it's over here on the screen. You can't move it. You can't change it.
Mm-hmm.
People have preferences about their UI, how they'd like it. We can accommodate those preferences, so we get lots of great feedback on that. Another big area is reports and dashboards are vanilla to us. Competitors charge for it, whereas we teach you how to use the dashboard editor and report writer in our product, and then we go away and you have at it, and it doesn't require IT programming or IT chops.
Yep.
It's literally selecting columns and row arrays, saving it, and then running it. People love that. And so, things I take for granted, like being multi-device even. Of course you could run your business on a tablet or a cell phone. I have a customer who runs his business from a cell phone. I take that for granted because our model has always been one platform, feature functionality, all in one place. The analogy I use is your cell phone. You have email on Android or Apple. You've got texting. You've got phone calls. You've got all the apps you want. You're not buying a separate platform and a separate phone every time you want new capability. Why should you do that with business apps? Is the core of the vision. You should not have to buy another tech stack if you want to do LTL or if you're doing specialized heavy haul. It should all live on one platform, and we just put the feature functionality on that platform just like your darn cell phone. And business apps should behave the same way. And so it goes back to one of our taglines is innovate, don't integrate. You spend all your time integrating systems that don't naturally talk to each other. That's no way to live. Have it all on one platform. In our case, it's the Salesforce platform.
Okay. Today's episode is also brought to you by Control Chain. Struggling to find loads? Control Chain offers a cost-effective solution for carriers to secure more freight contracts with reliable shippers. Sign up at controlchain.com and start receiving loads today.
Do you, curious, Charles, do you ever hang out with other TMS CEOs? And if you do, what are the topic points you talk about? Do you hang out with some of them?
Well, initially they didn't want to talk to me. And I think now they don't want to talk to me even less. But,
Wait, before you get into that, is that because when you came out in 2014, they saw you as a threat?
I don't think so. I think we were under the radar, and now they know us, and it is what it is. We just have very different ways of thinking about the marketplace, and this very conversation we're having about whether it's the app exchange or common UI in a configurable UI, product releases 4 times a year. It's just a fundamentally different conversation that I'm having with prospects and customers.
Building on top of Salesforce,
right?
forces a different way of thinking about the whole problem.
Exactly.
Is it exclusive, the agreement that you have with Salesforce, that like could someone else open up start a TMS? And
theoretically, it is possible, and there are some transportation products on the platform, but they're more visualization tools. And I look, every week. More. Right.
You're going to check out.
I'm seeing a list about the obsession.
Yeah.
But kidding aside, the up-and-comers are the ones I look at the most, not my legacy competitors who couldn't get to Salesforce if they wanted to at this stage. So it's the people with the new seed money that are up and coming. But so far, over the last 10 years, no one has a quote-to-cash a TMS on the platform.
Mm-hmm. Good.
That's I guess I'm be curious to kind of zoom out a little bit and just like talk more generally about kind of the state of the technology in logistics and how it's evolved over time. And you've hinted at it a little bit, talking about like the devices and ELDs and that sort of stuff. But like, what do you see as like the biggest? You talked about anchors earlier. Like, what do you think the biggest anchor on just freight tech in general is these days?
Good question. I would say the biggest drag is, and I'll see this with the largest firms. So the ones that think their tech is proprietary. And the headline I've always said to them, and I know many of these leaders, is, are you in the technology business? Now, some of them will tell you, yes.
Yeah.
And I said, so you have 350 IT people. In your latest quarterly filing with the SEC, those salaries amounted to like $40 million a year, some number. Is that really where you want to spend your money? And a lot of this gets defensive quickly with them, if they're honest, because they do think their tech is proprietary, and they do have a lurking suspicion still of data in the cloud. That's interesting to me, but nothing they do is proprietary. It's all stuff I've done with others or what have you. And that can be disarming, because if you think of the largest ones and you look at their products that they trumpet, some of them are, the largest one, their tech is quite dated, and they know it. And the other ones are thinking through, because they have earnings goals to meet, and there's only so much you can get from margin of the unit economics of freight, so they have to be creative in other areas. And I think as we gain more traction in that marketplace, they will see this. But one of the drags, quote unquote, is the Fortune 100 of 3PLs. We'll call it the Fortune 10 because it's, as you know, it's a different kind of market composition. They're wedded to their legacy tech in whatever form it is. And that is a limitation on their earning potential and their capabilities that they could have. So that's one drag. The other is that I see is you get this just explosion. You talked earlier about the capital that's been pouring into the SaaS tech logistics world. And as a result, it creates lots of shiny objects. So you go to the trade shows over the years, you see the names kind of pass in and out of existence. And people, it can be confusing. You guys might remember the Star Wars movies, but there's the bar scene at Star Wars 1 of all the weird aliens. And that's what a lot of the trade shows resemble. Because we got people, It's like they got Series A money in their wallet and they're ready for love. Yeah. And they're offering a very specific solution that may or may not be relevant, but they've got a lot of energy and marketing dollars behind it, and it confuses the buyer.
Yeah.
And so there is a food chain in our industry, and it starts with the TMS players because we're the entree on the plate. We decide, we're the system of record, and we're going to integrate to partners who make sense for us. And so that gets sorted over the years of who's really driving this.
Yep.
And then you have kind of the weird top-down initiatives. Think of blockchain. So remember, you might remember this, the Freightway shows like in the 20...
Blockchain and Trucking Alliance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you had massive blockchain booths, IBM and others. And now I kind of shed a tear. They had like a little corner booth at the latest shows, maybe 10 by 10, whereas before they had 40 by 40.
Yeah.
And what happened, you have all this marketing investment going into blockchain, but it wasn't demanded really by the marketplace. It was tech looking for a solution.
Yeah.
I think the opposite is the case with AI. I think there are applications for AI, obviously. The problem is, there's more AI articles written than loads moved by AI at the moment. And so, but it has to be use case based that has real economic value for AI to take off the way it should versus just another blockchain initiative.
Do you think that like the kind of failures is maybe a strong word, but we could argue, the failures of like the empty promises made by those sorts of institutions, companies, and more broadly, just like big blockchain, capital B, big like entity, like ideas. Like, do you think that those empty promises have made folks gun shy about new implement? Yeah. So like AI, for example, being like another thing. Like people are less, even if there are real solutions there, they're less likely to explore them just because they've been burned. Yeah.
Right. Or think of products that when capacity was tight in truckload for several years, all of a sudden apps sprang out of the ground for I can help you with analysis on where's the capacity, what should its price be, and so on. And then as we've seen a drag in truckload for the last, let's say, 18 months or so, those products become less needed. You can see if it's flavor of the month stuff, it's not going to have lasting power. And so that's this food chain again of core TMS system and then what additional feature functionality you want to lay on top of it.
Charles, I'm kind of curious if we could get back to the proprietary tech you mentioned earlier. And I know that like in 2015, Coyote was acquired, I guess, also in part because of Bazooka. American Backhaulers was acquired because of their TMS also.
Right.
There's that. And would you say that like we're kind of past that, like ever since like the cloud-based kind of like tech came in, Revenova came in? Would you say like that's like that we won't be seeing a lot of brokerages getting acquired because of their tech? And that might be the reason why some companies still want to have their own tech?
Yeah, could be. And I've seen some acquisitions where they bought the technology provider because that's what they had integrated to, and the technology provider was financially shaky. And so, but I think when you buy a business for its tech, then there has to be something that is truly proprietary about it. And from what I can see, there was nothing in particular proprietary about any of those acquisitions that couldn't be done by ourselves or other people who play the way I play. So that's you go into that to get into that industry vertical. If you're going into it for the tech, well, what's the life span of that tech then? Do you think it's never going to have to be updated or modified in some way? So buying it for the tech kind of perpetuates the identity crisis of the acquirer. What are you buying it for? The tech? So wouldn't you buy it because you want to be in that industry? Because it complements an offering you already have? So often these acquisitions are not thought all the way to the end game, frankly. And there's no need to point out the latest bodies on this, but it's obvious when people buy stuff for the tech, that's usually a bad reason.
Okay. And I feel like that hasn't really happened recently, though. Like, has it?
Well, Coyote got sold.
Right.
Coyote got sold.
Right.
I know, but I'm saying those
And a law.
Convoy.
Yeah.
Significant.
Convoy got bought for the tech, but they did respin it.
Yeah.
Right. So that was for the tech, but at least there was like
Earlier, it was more in demand because like there weren't that many TMSs out there that were offered.
Right.
So like
Right.
it made sense back in the day, but now it seems like it's
Possibly. I mean, who can say? But I think you buy let's say you're an asset company and you buy a brokerage because you want to be in brokerage. That's the first mission.
Yeah.
And part of it is usually the buyer is obviously not coming from brokerage, so they don't know all of the perhaps subtleties of the technology in brokerage.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's what about this whole kind of like build versus buy debate, maybe for lack of a better term, like folks like if you're starting a brokerage, obviously building your own TMS is from the ground up is a gigantic lift,
right?
And we do see, a lot of the legacy players have over the years built their own stuff and have seen success with it. You can argue whatever you could argue that, but like, are you often having conversations with folks where they're like, oh, well, we could implement Revenova or we could just build it ourselves?
Absolutely.
And you're kind of walking them through that thought process.
Yes.
Yeah.
That does come up. Not with the small guys, but with the guys that have been in the industry for a while and they're right at the tipping point of going from, let's say, 200 million to 500 million and on to $1 billion. Then they start saying, maybe we should build something that meets our needs.
Yeah.
And the problem is the way we try to facilitate that conversation is, when does that investment stop? And are you in the IT business? Sometimes they'll go off on that and then they'll come back to us and say, okay, let's go. And so that's a very, I don't begrudge anyone wanting to go through that thought process at all. They should. But are you going to keep up with the latest API partners in your industry? Now, they might say yes, but then there's an expense to doing that. And people always minimize the soft costs, or maybe not so soft, salary expenses.
Yeah.
Do you have people dedicated to doing nothing but latest tech methods, latest partners in different areas of the app who are going to build that? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it does take them off their core mission if they do the whole build thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and people underestimate how complex building is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a hard thing for me even. I'm not a technical coder, but translating your business requirements into an engineering spec for a developer, you need a whole different skill set to do that.
Yeah.
You need someone who can translate it for the engineers, but someone who's also been in the business on the floor. Those people are rare to find. They're hard to find.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so difficult, because we'll sit with customers for days and days and days. And this is why people move to agile development methods. It's basically, tell me how you want LTL quoting to work. And then you go off and build it and show it to them. They go, we forgot weekend accessorial. Oh, okay, we go off and add that. You show it to them. Again, that's a very agile, back and forth, iterative process. And that's how most people do it today, that do it well and do it quickly, is get code in front of people as fast as you can. Versus the old method from 30 years ago is, let's spend 6 months documenting your process. Yeah. Create a big binder, and then we go off and don't talk to you for another 6, 9, 12 months and build it. And then we come back and you tell me all the things that are wrong with it.
Yeah.
That's timely, it's expensive, whereas the agile process is that accelerated approach to development, which is what we tend to do, and Salesforce does with our 4 release a year, cadence.
Do you think that if you were to start Revenova now, rewrite history, you start it now, would you start on Salesforce now?
Yeah. Still would, because they invest well over $1 billion a year just in platform feature functionality, safety, data security, uptime, in addition to something called Einstein AI, and the entire app exchange. So they're in a unique position still. And so they've been a great partner of ours from a development standpoint, and as well as they make deploying our app very easy as well. And so, for example, ORG is kind of the core unit in Salesforce. Your org is your instance of my product.
Yeah.
I can offer trial orgs to my customers as well. They don't necessarily use it because we do it in the sales demos, but offering a trial is interesting and sometimes attractive to people. All the way through to, with Salesforce, I can spin up branded portals for my customer's customer or their carriers. And this is what the big 3PLs thought was proprietary for years. Well, my tech, I'm able to do websites. And this is vanilla functionality for us. Just give me your logo, JPEG, and we can spin up a branded portal for you in 48 hours with all of the feature functionality of the base product. And you can turn on, turn off what you see fit. You don't want them to see your markup logic. But imagine that was unimaginable 10 years ago. And that's why you still have this legacy thinking among the largest brokerages, the largest 3PLs in North America of, I have to have my own tech to do these special things. And my message is, no, you don't. And you can have it at the fraction of the cost. You don't need a 300-man IT department.
Levity.ai. In freight, time is money and efficiency is key. That's where Levity comes in. Imagine automating your email operations to do more with less effort. Levity connects directly to your inboxes, extracting vital information from emails and attachments in real time. It seamlessly integrates with your TMS, empowering you to quote faster, build loads more efficiently, and book more freight in less time. Visit Levity.ai today to sign up and get started.
Yeah, and it's not trivial. Just all those things you kind of glossed over, or not glossed over, but cited, those bullet points, the security, the portals, those are not trivial things to implement on your own.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
The basic premise that all industries is you lease depreciating assets and you own appreciating assets.
Yeah.
This is true of any industry.
Yeah.
Why on earth would you build a depreciating asset like technology, which inherently depreciates every year? You would never own anything like that by choice. And yet the largest firms insist on owning their depreciating assets all the time and shoveling more money into them.
Would you say all technology is depreciating?
Yes. Think of one device you have that you had, the identical device, even 6 years ago. Can you think of one?
Same device as 6 years ago?
Maybe a flat panel TV that you like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. But you see, your cell phone is in the last, let's say, 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
Your flat panel TV. Think of any tech that you're using, a wearable, whatever it is. Was it around 10 years ago? It certainly wasn't.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. Technology, because its nature is to advance and develop and grow, you don't own that kind of thing, because if you're stepping on the depreciation from day one. That's what I mean.
Yeah, actually, that's a valid point. And the only example I think I can find, new one, or a single one, which is as like a Tesla that updates its software and becomes actually more and more capable, which the same kind of, at least how Yellen says, is like that this is going to eventually be like an appreciating asset. That's the only example.
The vehicle depreciating.
The vehicle itself.
Right.
That's like the ultimate depreciating asset.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, wouldn't pick an automobile as an appreciating asset.
Yeah, I guess except for if it could, make
Reskin itself or new chassis,
I guess I shouldn't have bought that Lambo.
new powertrains.
That's actually an interesting way to frame it. I've never really thought about it like the depreciating asset. That is
maintain it.
And is that a useful?
You got to maintain it, right?
Is that a useful analogy for you in your sales? If you put your sales hat on,
it's a macro point that people say, "Okay, Charles, back to earth."
How do you involve yourself in the business now? Like, what do your days look like? Like, what do you do?
It evolved over time.
Yeah.
So when you start out, you're connecting phones and, negotiating everything and, doing all the HR and all that. So anyone who started a company knows your life is miserable.
Yeah.
But the obsession keeps you fueled through it.
Yeah.
Our team has grown immensely.
How many people do you have now?
We have around 70 people now. And 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, we brought in a capital partner called Viking Global Capital. And they're about a $55 billion fund out of New York. And they made a significant investment in Revenova. And they said,
like an equity investment?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said, Charles, we love what you're doing. We just want you to do it faster.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went through with them my vision that I was kind of outlining with you guys on here's where I want to take this. I want to strengthen our TMS multimodal strategy, and I want to expand that supply chain footprint strategy too, which they love this. And so, because I do want to compete with Oracle. I do want to compete, frankly, with NetSuite, with massive installation bases and multi-billion-dollar businesses, as well as my lead competitors in the TMS world. And so there's plenty of what they call TAM, total addressable market.
Yeah, the investors like that.
Yeah. And so, but it's also something unique. This has never been done on Salesforce, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is very attractive to me. It was very attractive to them. We didn't need the capital, frankly. We had been a very successful business financially. But I saw in them someone who wasn't going to micromanage me, and wasn't going to, they shared the vision of this. And so they said, great. So they put a lot of capital on our balance sheet, and we've been growing that ever since. And so we continue to grow in this environment that's difficult for my customers, but my market share isn't the largest of the competition, so I'm able to grow in this environment. Particularly when people have more, I'm not the highest price provider, and so I'm totally variable in my price structure, user-based and so on. Whereas some of my competitors have large fixed cost line items on their invoices to my customers, and no one wants a large fixed cost anymore. And so I am a very light, completely variable expense to my customer base.
I mean, I've asked them the series here, so you guys have anything you want?
Well, it's 3:30 right now, so I'm not sure, Charles, how you're on with time.
Why don't we do 10 more minutes?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I go again?
Yeah, go ahead, Reed.
All right. So
15 more.
let's talk. We've given you ample opportunity to talk yourself up. I've got a couple questions. Just not even. I don't even mean to like talk you down. I like.
We can edit these out.
So I guess something like if you just talk in tech in general, like when you're building a company, a lot of folks talk about like platform risk.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what risks are inherent to building on somebody else, on top of somebody else's platform, Salesforce, for example?
Yeah.
Like, do you guys think about that? Like, much now? Like, do you think about it in the beginning? Like, how has that evolved? Like,
because I have now almost over 15-year relationship with Salesforce, I don't worry about that very much. I know all the key people there. Yeah. They love what we're doing. The bigger, macro risk is the internet goes down.
Yeah, sure.
And so
you think about
it? Yeah, but
I think that basically is a problem for anybody. Even
Well, I mean, if you talk about platform risk as in like telecommunication systems and all that stuff, we could go forever on that.
Yeah,
right. What I mean, so it's not really a concern for you.
Not in particular.
Yeah.
Not in particular.
Okay.
But we are a cloud-based company, so the internet is important.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure.
I mean, even for off-prem.
Right.
Well, I guess you could contain it.
Maybe that's the on-prem. Maybe they need to lean into that a little bit. Hey, we are internet going down.
Well, you can see in SEC filings when people do a public offering, they have that section of what are the risks of this transaction, and the internet is always listed.
I mean, I guess that is the fundamental risk. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, you guys.
I'm more curious on your personal side of life, Charles. If you could take us through that a little bit, tell us what do you like doing in your free time?
Yeah.
What do you like to read? What do you like to listen to? How do you spend your days?
Well, being 61, playing basketball every day, every week isn't quite sustainable anymore.
I was about to think. Oh, wow, you're playing basketball.
See how I started that? But I did enjoy playing basketball quite a bit when I was younger. Now it's golf. And I also enjoy playing chess.
Nice.
And
Do you play chess on the app or like on the?
Yes to all those. And I'm a bit of a nerd on this in that I play chess competitively in tournaments for cash prizes.
Oh, wow.
I just played it as a kid, then went away from it, and have come back to it. So those are things that.
What's your favorite chess piece?
That tells me you're not a chess player.
Was it the queen?
Next, you're going to say horsey.
Is it the queen? Is it the queen?
No, I would say checkmate is the most important thing to think about.
Well, I mean, like the piece. Like, are you queen? Like,
whatever.
What do you wield?
Whatever piece gets you to checkmate is what you care.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm not a chess player. I mean, I know.
I gathered that.
We'll cut this part in. I'm just going to keep it in.
No, I also have 13 nieces and nephews.
Oh, nice.
Mentioned that I enjoy spoiling, and so that occupies some time too.
What about so you grew up around here?
Yes.
All right. Building your business in Chicago, is that important, you think?
Not particularly, because we have a lot of remote employees, frankly, and that's just the nature of things now. Has
it always been that way?
In the early stages, no, but as we've grown, you really find great, talented people everywhere, and so we take advantage of that. And frankly, though my bias is to everyone together, I think you miss out on some great people if you insist on that.
Yeah, sure.
But you then have to work harder to manage that culturally, to make sure everyone's aligned and working in the same direction. Absolutely.
Do you ever run into your competitor on the golf course? Because I know you're both in the same city.
I do now and then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you ever like talk?
Briefly.
Yeah.
You ever play golf? Who's better at golf?
They probably are, because I haven't played enough.
Oh, you're busy.
Well, it must be funny, kind of like running into them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not adversarial, or
Sure.
It doesn't.
The market's big, and there's a lot of other competitors out there. But
right.
It is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
To have that. Very interesting. This has been great, Charles. I love this interview. Like, really, really cool. Edit the chess part out. Before we finish, is there anything that you'd like to tell us or tell our audience?
No, I've enjoyed the discussion as well. I think you guys have done a great job both now and up to this point. So I look forward to seeing you guys more in the market as well, and what you're up to. And there's certainly room for it. And I looked at some of your past podcasts too, and enjoyed them quite a bit. So
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Freight Caviar podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more Freight Caviar content, go to freightcaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.